It feels like the same argument some people have about modern pop music being less sophisticated. People looking in the wrong places for sophistication.
Dance Music Secrets with Kevin McKay.
Hi, and welcome to Dance Music Secrets. Today we're going to be asking, is dance music really dumb? Can you write a hit with one chord? And why does dance music hate covers so much? Today on Dance Music Secrets, I'm joined by David Bennett, a musician, composer and YouTuber with over 1.2 million subscribers. He's gained that by making music theory fun and engaging for millions. He also teaches piano online and writes and produces his own songs. And there's no one better to explore these questions than David, as he's broken down the hidden theory in pop, rock and even dance music for years. Welcome, David.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Cheers, man. So, tell us briefly, what got you into music theory?
I started music ultimately self-taught. I did have about a year of piano lessons when I was 11 years old, but I really didn't get on with them.
Right, okay. Why was that?
It was just learning songs I didn't recognize. It was like learning like the graded stuff.
Yeah.
So despite being like quite a music lover at that age already, I loved the Beatles, I loved Queen, I wanted to play that stuff, right?
Right, okay.
But it so much comes down to your teachers. Some teachers are very stuffy and they just do the grades, and it didn't work for me. So I kind of left that. But then a few years later, when some of my mates were, getting in bands and playing guitars and drums and stuff, I thought, well, I've got this keyboard still. Started working stuff out. And at first I was therefore like just kind of coming up with my own theory, so to speak.
Right, okay.
Because I didn't know any of the real labels and names. And then when I went to college and studied music for the first time at A-level, it was like this awakening of like, oh, there's names for all of these things. Like, this language I've made up myself, I didn't need to do that. There's already there's a whole system. And it was just very satisfying. And it helps you, like, it's like a chef learning the taste of like different herbs and spices. It's like, I've always like detected that, but I never knew what it was called. And now I can like see why all of those songs have the same flavor,
Amazing. And YouTube, so tell us a bit about YouTube. What made you first like hit upload on YouTube?
I've been obsessed with YouTube since it first came out. Like 2005, I was like 13 years old, and
okay, wow.
I was already like, at the time I was obsessed with like Lego stop motion, and that's what I did first. And I actually did alright with that. I got like 100,000 views on the Lego stop motion, and I was very chuffed with that. And then when I got a bit older, I was into music, so I tried doing music on YouTube, but that's a whole different game. And it actually took me until about sort of 8 years ago now, so 10 years after that Lego channel, I managed to get the same success again finally with this YouTube channel.
Right, okay.
So I was hitting my head against YouTube for a long time, and then finally worked out how to make it work.
And so how did you make it work? What was the difference?
I think so. I tried doing original music on there. I tried doing cover songs. I tried doing kind of more traditional piano sort of tutorials, which to mixed results. But I think the thing that really made it work is I discovered this channel called Adam Neely.
Right,
I don't know if you've watched him. He's kind of like the music theory Vsauce. I don't know if you remember Vsauce, like kind of education but very entertaining.
Right, okay.
Making quite sophisticated topics, in this case music theory, fun.
Right, okay.
And I'd never seen someone do this before, like teach music theory in this engaging way when they're relating it to pop music and asking really interesting questions. And I'd always been obsessed with theory. At uni, I was like the theory guy. Like people have like tuition with me to like get their theory chops up before the exam. So it's like, I could probably do this. I could teach theory like this. And within the first, it was like the first video, just blew up. Like within the first year, I had 75,000 subscribers.
Amazing.
And it was already like, I could actually, this could be my living. I could do this now. It was crazy.
But yeah, it sounds like a sort of classic example of a business doing well when you see a gap there, and it's like, music theory is hard. I mean, I did grade 1 to 5 music theory, and I hated it as a teenager. It was just, you can understand it. It was just
dry.
How can you relate this to like the real world? And no one who was teaching music theory was going to relate it to the real world, because they're all music teachers in high school, and you're like, you don't know anything about what I think about music.
Definitely. Well, the tradition, it's a bit like what I was saying about my original piano lessons, is you get these teachers of music who their only experience of music is being taught music, and their teacher's only experience of music was being taught music.
Yeah.
So they see music as this thing that you just learn for the sake of learning, completely forgetting the value of music and why anyone actually likes music. So they're like, you learn this theory, and the reason it doesn't relate to the music you love is because it's just there to get you through an exam, and that's it. And it's almost like, I always relate it to like if you were taking a driving theory test on the rules of the road, but you had no intentions on driving and you'd never been in a car. It's like, what are these arbitrary rules that I have to learn just for some stupid exam? So yeah, that's what I was trying to do, is like, make that link between theory and the thing it's actually theorizing, music.
And do you see, I mean, have you seen other educators come in your wake, and what have you seen? What's the kind of what are the kind of things that they've done that have either inspired you or worried you or made you think, oh, that's not quite right, or mistakes that people have made?
So when I first came into it, there was only a few people in the sort of space doing those sort of things, like music theory on YouTube, and it quickly developed. And there's been people sort of really kind of rise and then sort of disappear in that time.
Right. Okay.
I've managed to sort of somehow like weather the storm. I think YouTubing isn't necessarily for everyone. There's some people like they get a big boom and then they enjoy it for a while and then they kind of fall out of love with it. But now I've been doing it long enough that I see people come up who are either sort of kind of like, it seems like they're inspired by me, or some who just quite clearly say like, I'm inspired by your videos.
Right. Okay.
And it's really amazing because that's exactly how I got into it. Copying other people really.
Yeah.
And you sometimes see information imparted which isn't, like, I wouldn't completely agree with, but then I've made my own mistakes, and music theory is also one of those things where different people have different ways of doing it. Yeah, it's a bit like arguing over English spelling with an American. It's like, well, you're actually just using two different systems, and that's why you're having an argument. There's those nuances to it which can sometimes lead to misunderstandings, but largely I think it's a absolute sort of like a font of information on YouTube.
Yeah, and obviously YouTube was the first of the kind of video sharing websites that we have had as sort of in recent times, and now we've got TikTok and Instagram. How do you feel it's going on short form, and how do you feel? Can you relate your content into short form? Like, tell us a bit about your experience with that.
What is so interesting is that YouTube is still the only long form site. And that is the main difference with Instagram, TikTok, and also YouTube Shorts now. And I've tried, I do some shorts. They're largely cut out of my longer form material. But I often think the lessons I'm trying to teach in music in my channel, if you were in a music university, you'd have like an hour and a half lecture on this. Yeah. I'm already boiling that down into a 15-minute video. So to boil it down even further into like a 1 minute, or now you can do 3-minute shorts, there's only so much information you can get in. So like when education, like the value of it is it being accurate and understood. If you can't actually get accurate understanding from a short, then you probably shouldn't make it at all, because otherwise it's just going to mislead people. So there's only certain topics you can do, really.
It would be a difficult thing to do, to sort of break down much the things you need to understand in music in 60 seconds, because really you could say 3 minutes, but it's only the very, very best 3-minute videos that get anywhere. So most of the things that are getting there are 30 seconds or 45 seconds, and what can you really explain in 5 sentences?
The only shorts I've had do well, which have been related to the theory, have been sort of like quick little wins. Like, for example, explaining that pitch and rhythm, although we think of them as two different musical elements, are ultimately the same thing. Yeah. Where, like a pitch is a frequency like 440 hertz, which is 440 pulses per second. That's a rhythm, right? As a tempo. So like explaining something like that where it's like, oh, that's interesting. That works as a quick short. But even then, I think most people will be coming away with more questions than answers, and they need a longer form video really to explain it.
Maybe just breaking down each of the songs that Oasis have ripped off one by one in sort of 60 seconds.
Like, you could do a whole series on that.
Well, I mean, talking briefly about Oasis and ripping off other artists, and whether there's intelligence there leads us on to our next topic, which is sort of dance music intelligence or the intelligence within dance music. A lot of people often criticize dance music for being dumb. What do you say to that?
It feels like the same argument some people have about modern pop music being less sophisticated. And I think it largely comes down to people looking in the wrong places for sophistication.
Right, okay.
They look at some of the very kind of obvious things, like, how many chords you got, how many notes you got, how many sections does it have, where certain songs like Bohemian Rhapsody Queen rank very highly if you measure them that way. But those are only some of the parameters we can play with musically, and there's dozens of parameters, if not arguably hundreds. One of the most overlooked one is timbre, is the sound of...
The first thing that came to mind when you were saying
exactly, that. The sounds of the instruments. There's been an absolute explosion in timbres ever since the 90s onwards, ever since people have been using computers.
Yeah.
Because the computer is kind of the everything instrument. It can create so many sounds. And that's why, if you took any pop or dance track from the last 10 years and took it 20 years back in time and showed it to people, they'd be like, what? This sounds like nothing I've ever heard.
Yeah.
Which shows that music is still evolving and changing, and is interesting. But you have to keep an open mind to what even music is, right?
Yeah, I mean, you can't say you're not going to compare a big dance record to Bohemian Rhapsody in the same style. Exactly like you said. Yeah. I think that's totally fair. But being able to sort of take a song like, say, the Dennis Ferrer mix of Hey Hey, which was a huge tune and really based on a very simple bass and kick and percussion hook that was all in tune and all sort of moving really well together, and the choice, the discipline you have to choose those sounds and make that the only choice. That discipline is as strong as the kind of music theory you have to know to create.
Yeah, for sure.
It's arguable anyway.
It's all craftsmanship, and there's no hard line between music theory and music production. They're all just like the craft of music, right?
Yeah.
And the simplicity of dance music is potentially sometimes a feature rather than a bug, because different music has different utility, right? You're not going to dance to The Sound of Silence by Simon & Garfunkel because that music serves a different function in our lives. And dance music, because it's about an activity, dancing, it unfolds slower. It maintains a consistent space. It can't be too dynamic because you want to kind of be maintaining a vibe and a place rather than constantly changing and moving and confusing people.
I think that's a great point, and it sort of brilliantly leads us on to the next question, because you've got a lot of people. I find that the minute you start going into you having a pop chord progression, it stops feeling like a dance record. You're immediately, because you, like you said, you're moving too quickly. You're going from A to B and then back to A again, and really you just want to be sat on a groove, enjoying yourself.
Let it cook, yeah.
And so, often a lot of great dance songs are just written on one chord, but there's very few of them which end up being hits. You've done a brilliant YouTube video about them. Madonna's Music being one, and the other one,
Slow, Kylie.
Kylie's Slow, yeah. Why do you think it's so hard to write songs that really cross over into the public consciousness with just that one chord?
Well, yeah, like we were saying, the utility of dance music means it can unfold slowly, and it should unfold slowly. Whereas pop music is meant to be sort of quick and fast and attention grabbing. Usually you will have some sort of chord progression, which literally, as the name suggests, progresses you through. And even today, like, there's not as many chord progressions in music as there were, say, in the 70s. Like, now a song will very often just stay on one loop, whereas in the past you'd work through a whole series of chords to have a far more sense of journey.
Yeah.
But really, like we were saying before, there's so many parameters in music that you can move around. A tune like Music by Madonna is leaving the harmonic complexity sort of fader all the way down. Like, that's not where this music's going to find its intrigue. We'll move other things. We'll play with the dynamics and the timbres and the flow, and ultimately, a good melody, a good vibe, it can still be a pop hit, right? As long as it makes up for the lack of harmonic complexity elsewhere.
So you think it's it's kind of impossible to get that harmonic complexity with just one chord, or do you think is it still possible, just not in those examples?
I think at that point you're not even treating harmony as something you're thinking about. It makes me think of Indian classical music, which famously just kind of drones for like 20, 30 minutes. They're not even thinking about harmony. They don't have a concept there of chords. Like that's just like a bed, and then it's all about the melody. And that's very similar to these sort of tunes, like to dance music, to these one-chord songs, where just because harmony is something we can play with, you don't have to play with it. And if anything, you can find new and interesting sounds and emotions by leaving that alone.
It definitely has influenced dance music recently. There's sort of rise of Afro house. You'll find a lot of kind of one-note drones within that, and it not so much a chord, very much like the Indian classical music, just a kind of a tone, or maybe like multiple tones, but kind of within the one note, rather than ones that that are richer than that.
Definitely,
and it definitely gives this sort of feel of there's a mysterious kind of mood that's set with it, and I think that suits that Afro house. It
creates a place to be rather than a journey to go on, which are two very different kind of feelings, and both good for different reasons.
And so again, maybe something like Kylie's Slow, if you could break that down, do you feel that? Because I get with Madonna's music, it was definitely more, you could hear the stabs coming in and out. There was a lot of rhythm. The melody was good, strong, very repetitive, but whereas Slow is a bit more complex than that, I felt. And is that just my impression, or how do you see that song?
To me, it feels like a similar type of song where they are just leaving that harmonic complexity on the shelf and exploring other aspects of music. And what I find interesting is almost like the discipline to not go to another chord, because it'd be so tempting just to do that. Maybe just for like a bridge later.
No, it'd feel amazing. You push it up, and then it's like after.
And the wash of like that new chord would be like, this is something new. But every song offers a slightly different emotional experience.
Yeah,
and that's one.
No, it's a sort of classic Eric Prydz tactic, where he would basically have the melody like on a pedal note and have his melody, and then after a breakdown just lift it up, and the whole crowd's like,
and you can feel it. It's like a physical thing.
Cool. I was sort of looking at some of your other videos, and you make videos about pop songs that are written in different modes, and do you think there's anything in dance music that's been overlooked? Is there any kind of musical tricks, for example, that might suit dance music that you think is the dance music producers have overlooked?
For me, and you're definitely more well read in dance music, so correct me if you can think of an example. But for me, it seems like almost all dance music is in 4/4 time, as in like 4 beats in the bar.
Pretty much, Daft Punk have got every now and again I've seen one of their records where it's like they drop a beat, so it's not quite 15/16, but they kind of, and people add an extra beat.
Is that sort of what's it called?
Around the World?
Oh, Around the World. I was thinking of a different one actually, but they are certainly like one of those acts who are quite like they're pushing the scope of the music. But
it's still 4/4. They just miss a beat, so it's sort of like if
it was different.
It feels a bit different.
Yeah. So pop music in general, like all music really, kind of has a tendency to stay in 4/4.
Yeah.
But then in styles like rock maybe, or in pop sometimes you do get songs that venture into like for example, obvious ones are kind of going to 6/8 or 3/4 for more of a kind of waltz feel, or like you might get a bit more interesting with 5/4 or 7/4. I just love to hear a dance song that was like, rather than 4 on the floor, it was like 5 on the floor.
Definitely some 6/8 stuff within the kind of post, when dance music had its last kind of real trough, maybe 2004 to 2006, there was that kind of rock influence that came in with DFA and people like that. And Goldfrapp, Ewan Pearson producing Goldfrapp, he did some of that stuff in 6/8. There was like a kind of shuffle, sort of German shuffle sort of tendency, and there was a lot of that kind of where everything started to sound a bit like the sweet sort of like dunk.
If you're overcomplicating it, you'd call it 12/8.
Yeah,
where
but it's shuffle time.
It's kind of 4, but then each one divides into 3.
Yeah.
Then to be honest, I did a video like looking at trends in 21st century pop music, and there was like an era like late 2000s, early 2010s where it shuffle seemed to come into fashion. It was interesting.
I guess if there's a bunch of records together and people are dancing, the DJs, it's hard to play those records. It's hard to play a 4/4 record, even if it's super swung.
Yeah.
The minute you go into that kind of triplet time with 4/4 rhythms, it's like, oh, we're in a different groove now. So we kind of have to stay in this groove until we flip back out again. So it suited more what the Americans call open format DJs, but for us, it's like multi-genre DJs.
Yeah. So yeah, I'd love to hear that, and I'm sure it exists. So it makes you think as well of like Radiohead on their album Kid A, when they were introducing sort of like the IDM influences from Aphex Twin and those sort of acts, and they were using a lot of odd meters. So maybe in those sort of slightly less mainstream dance genres that it has been explored, I'm sure someone's done it.
That leads us brilliantly on to our next section, which is about originality in dance music, specifically now about samples and covers. You've made some great videos about covers. Why do you think it is that, or this is my experience anyway, why do you think it is that pop and rock writers love it when their songs are covered, but dance music artists really don't like it?
Yeah, the idea of kind of covers in dance music, I think the line gets blurred because dance music uses samples so much, which is almost like a form of cover song, right?
Yeah.
And also remixes and just interpolations as well. Like it makes you think of that new version of Blue.
Yeah, Eiffel 65.
David
Guetta's
David
version.
Guetta's, and he changes the lyric to what is it? To "I'm Good" or something. So is that a cover? Is it not? I don't think he actually sampled the record, but he's like replaying it, which is, if you replay something, you are covering it basically. So
yeah, they'll have added new lyrics.
Yeah.
I mean, cynically, a cynic might say that he's added new lyrics in order to gain some of the publishing interest in this new song, because I think his new version's done over 1 billion streams. So the revenue from that, as a sort of business manager of David Guetta, I'm going to say to you, you should change some of the lyrics because people care about that melody, and you can change the lyrics, get some publishing interest, and then you'll make more money from putting this song out rather than just doing it as a straight cover. And I guess for some reason people see that as like an intelligent way to use samples, but doing a straight cover is less intelligent. I don't really get the...
I guess it depends what the cover is. Like if the cover's bringing something new and interesting, then there's like a perceived value there. But the culture of covers has changed so much over the years.
It has.
Back in the 50s and 60s, a hit song wouldn't necessarily be associated with one artist. Everyone will be doing their version of it, which is why, when you go far enough back, you have like the American Songbook, where you have all of these classic songs, which just every singer sang. They kind of belong to everyone in a way. But I think each genre has their own etiquette, really. Adam Neely, who I mentioned earlier, another music theory YouTuber, did a great video about why you don't get covers in hip hop, in rap, because issues with authenticity, right? If you're rapping someone else's rap, it's like, well, those are someone else's words and someone else's emotions.
It's really true, actually, because the first kind of hip hop hit, Rapper's Delight by the Sugar Hill Gang, famously they couldn't get the rappers because hip hop started in the kind of mid 70s and it was a live experience mostly.
Yes.
And the record labels were trying to get the sort of famous rappers to record their rhymes, and they wouldn't do it because they were like, it's a live thing. So the record label executive went into New Jersey, found some people that could rap, and they ended up rapping other rappers' lines. And so Rapper's Delight is made up of all these lines that people knew from going out to like block parties.
Right, I didn't know that.
And when you talk to the originators of the rhymes, like DJ Kaz, whose rhymes in there but sang by someone else, they're like, "How can you do that? That's my rhyme." So I guess if a genre is built on that idea that you shouldn't be doing someone else's lines, they are their lines, and originality is so important. And I guess maybe dance music's the same. Do you think that kind of the way that techno came out of Detroit, and it was very much like an art, and this is our art and you don't touch it? Do you think that's maybe the same authenticity exists?
I think so. I think anytime a genre is sort of new and emerging, it has a very strong subculture to it, and it's it's sort of music first, money second, because that's where it came from, right? No one invented it as a means of making money. They wanted to express themselves.
Yeah.
But then the moment it hits sort of the big industrial machine and becomes pop music, then everyone's priorities change. And they had a hit with that song. Maybe we could do a hit with that song.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think when you get into any culture, music subcultures, like I think of jazz as well, there's nuance to how you treat other people's music. So in jazz, you would certainly do versions of other people's tunes. That's kind of the language of jazz. But you wouldn't note for note replicate their solo.
Yeah.
Unless you were doing it as like a practice exercise. But you wouldn't then get up on stage and do that, because that'd be weird. That you would do your own take on it.
It's interesting that you talk about remixes, because it's just occurred to me that maybe it's the remix that's the cause of dance music's dislike of covers, because it was also another thing that you said that made me think about that, the American Songbook. And you did some videos about covers and some of the early songs by like the Temptations or people like that. And you look at the other cover versions around and they sound very similar. The delivery's similar. There's not a huge difference between the vocal performance, the instruments used. They kind of sound like remixes of one another, but because they're not, because they were performed by different people.
Yeah.
But the songs... Do you think a lot of songs got to that way because they were performed by different people and different artists went, oh, that's a nice way to sing that line. That's a nice way to sing that line. And so there was a kind of crowdsourcing of the best version of that song.
I think there's also an element of, particularly in the early days, the different music markets, so like America versus Europe versus UK, were less homogenous. So you could have a big hit in the US that didn't touch the UK. So a manager in the UK will notice that and be like, oh, let's do that. And they have no reason not to do a carbon copy, because no one's ever heard the original. So why not do a carbon copy? It's proven that it works. But yeah, you're just making me think, actually, a DJ remixing a track is basically a cover version, only because the only difference being that a DJ isn't necessarily like re-performing. They're not sitting down with a guitar. Their instrument is a computer or whatever. But ultimately, it is still a cover version. It's the same sort of ethos behind it.
Yeah, what made me think, when you mentioned remixes, it made me think, as a dance artist, you have your performance and then you get it remixed. And so the idea that the vocal that sounds in this way, that with different backings, you as an artist, you own all of those entities, because you can get your song remixed. And that's just because the remixes evolved from something in the 70s where it was like, oh, we're actually going to change the fader volumes, we're going to make the percussion louder, we're going to sort of extend the intros and extend the outros. And in the 90s, it became like, oh no, we're just going to take the vocal and we're going to completely rewrite the backing track. So any dance artist from the 90s onwards thinks that, well, if you've used my top line vocal and melody and you've performed and it sounds like my performance, then that's mine.
Yeah.
So you can't, that's why that might be the reason why they hate covers, because if you, and again, it's another question for you, I found that covers really only work when they are performed in a very close style to the original or completely different from the original. How do you feel about that?
I think that the most valuable covers are completely different from the original. They're bringing something new to the table. If they're very similar, I think the only reason they work is because the original song maybe wasn't that well known yet.
Yeah.
So someone maybe of a bigger stature has brought it to a wider audience. But yeah, anytime you look at a list of like famous covers, I think of All Along the Watchtower, Jimi Hendrix. It's a completely new reworking of the song.
Yeah.
It's almost a different song, but close enough that we can't say that, and therefore it is a cover version.
Yeah, I mean, I think most people would agree that sort of artistically, critics are more happy with covers when they're done in a really, and people like Cat Power more than they like someone, I don't know, Michael Bublé, who who sings very similar versions to other
to
Frank
Tony
Sinatra.
Bennett or Frank Sinatra. It's basically the same thing but with a modern sheen.
Yeah.
But then that is like a commercial setting. Like if there wasn't that big pop music industry around it, people would just go back and listen to Frank Sinatra because it's more or less the same thing. But the Michael Bublé version has like a new sheen to it and a new brand, and it's made for the modern times.
Yeah.
It's marketing over anything else.
Yeah, I often think that the original artist might not like the fact that someone has covered them in their style and then putting it out, but the songwriter surely is going to like that. The songwriter, if they exist purely as a songwriter, to have artists record their songs, and surely the songwriter's going to love that.
Hopefully they're just happy that their song is having a wider appeal, but then they're thinking in terms of the song as like an abstract concept rather than their personal performance and recording of it.
Yeah, the person who wrote Natalie Imbruglia's Torn, for example, which was a kind of minor hit in Sweden or Norway.
Yeah, the Edna Swap version is. I love that version, but I hadn't heard that for years.
Yeah, but then obviously it became a global hit. So it'd be interesting to ask them: are they happy with that, or would they rather it remained their song?
I think their ideal world would be their version was the global hit.
But that's it. It can't always happen.
Exactly.
Moving on to sampling, you've made loads of brilliant videos about samples, but one of the sort of key things that you spoke about was the invisibility of samples, or how samples are kind of just not there, and how does that, when you find out the sample exists, does that change your feeling about the song? Does it change your feeling about the artist? Because it wasn't them who wrote and did all of that stuff, it's just a sample. How do you feel about that, samples in dance music?
I've had a lot of people say actually in the comments to those videos and personally as well that when they discover that a song they love was actually based on a cover version and they hear that original song that was sampled and they realize that a lot of what they liked about this newer version was actually just in the old version. They feel a little bit sort of like betrayed somehow, and I think it's the it almost feels dishonest, and I know that's not like what it's meant to be. I think there's a fine line with it. For me, like the best examples of sampling where it works and it doesn't feel dishonest is when an artist has used lots of samples from lots of sources. So like Fatboy Slim stuff, or we mentioned Daft Punk earlier. I think of Groove is in the Heart by D-Light. Like there's so many like weird little samples in there and they're used so creatively. But then when you have a song that is basically just one sample, a significant section from it, and then someone's just kind of put a new top line over it. Even if most people do prefer the new version, it does feel like somehow there was a level of cheating there. And if the song had actually instead been marketed as a collaboration rather than by just the new artist, then it would be less sort of deceiving.
I totally agree with you. I see it a lot with dance music, and certainly when we release, we do a lot of, as a label, we do a lot of songs that are covers or got big samples in, and I always talk about it because I think you should always give the props to the heritage, and it might be you've done a new version, but I want people to know that it's a new version of this song, or it's a new version incorporating this sample. And when you see artists who are like, oh, this is my new song, and it's got a sample, even if that sample's been replayed or whatever, it just feels a little bit like this feels a bit wrong. And then you see artists as well who essentially have done a cover version, but because they've gone to the publisher and asked for it to be cleared as an interpolation, even getting 0% of the writing, so 100% goes to the original writer, they're allowed to then change the name of the song that to all intents and purposes, it doesn't look like a cover. There's always been smoke and mirrors in pop music, and do you think that's just part and parcel of how difficult it is to become like a big thing in music, so people are using all the tricks they can?
I think, a lot of the time, people aren't going to be listening to music with the full context of anything, so that they could easily hear a cover song and not know it's a cover. They can hear a song that's based on a sample and not know it's a sample. They could even hear a song that is very typical of its style, but because they've never heard anything else in that style, they think, oh, this is very new, amazing. So there's always going to be a level of people kind of realizing at a later time that, oh, it's not as original as I thought it was. But at some point, all artists, and audiences realize that there's nothing new under the sun, right? And everything's a remix to a certain extent, and you just kind of accept that and just make sure you give credit and reimbursement to the people who are owed it.
Interesting, leads us on to our next point, which is like, when has it gone too far? I remember reading an interview with David Bowie, and he says, oh, I don't bother about like who wrote it. If I hear a good thing, I just nick it now. And I may be paraphrasing. And And you've done plenty of videos about Oasis and the songs and songs that they've used. And I've seen Noel Gallagher say, "Oh, I'm surprised I've not been sued for this." So, I mean, where do you stand on that? When do you think it's too far? Do you think there isn't a too far? Do you think people? So, do you think Noel Gallagher should be saying, like, I want to clear this, I want to do this properly, or is it up to the original copyright owner to sort of hunt him down?
There is definitely some sort of like threshold between, so if I sang Yesterday by the Beatles and just pretended it was mine, clearly not acceptable. But if I use 2 notes from it, almost undetectable. And there's some line in between those two extremes where it goes from acceptable to not acceptable.
Probably 4 notes in the melody.
Possibly, yeah. It's hard to say.
It is.
And then, you get onto like style and genre, where like all a style really is songs that sound like each other. So if you get too militant about it and say like, it can't even sound like a song. It's like that Blurred Lines versus Marvin Gaye thing.
Yeah.
It's like what you're basically saying is no one else can write a song that sounds like Marvin Gaye. So no one can write a 70s soul or dance track ever again because that's been done, which is obviously unreasonable.
That was. I mean, that case is ridiculous though, because they obviously took it to court in America. It was in front of a jury, and then Robin Thicke, in his infinite wisdom, went in and said, "Yeah, we were playing it in the studio," and said, "Let's jam along to this."
Exactly.
So, like, I mean, he kind of shot himself in the foot with that one.
But then it is, the musicians are always sort of they know that it's like I didn't make any of this stuff up. I was just assembling. Like Noel Gallagher has said before, like I'm just assembling parts from my record collection. Yeah, and that is how all musicians work. But when it gets to a point where anyone, not some like litigious record label, but anyone on the street's like, oh, that's just another song. I recognize that. Then it's gone too far because all a song really is. The only thing that distinguishes one from another is the sense of sort of identity. In the same way that we can look at each other's faces and know one from the other, it's like you kind of just know it when you hear it. You know it when you see it. There's no way to define it. It's just when it's too much, it's too much. And personally, although I've done that video about Oasis, because I find it quite intriguing when you hear like, oh, that thing is actually that is definitely that. I don't think they've ever gone quite too far. They have always had more original in the pot than recycled. I
think it's a bit of a shame that he does it. I think it would be better. It would have been better if he'd cleared those ones and said, I've borrowed a bit of this. Can we, can I give you 25% of the writing, or can we call this a co-write? And then at least he could go, I did that, and I realised that it was this, and so we've sorted it out. And rather than just go, so what? But I guess that's part of his whole rock and roll, like I'm anti-establishment attitude.
I think until you're big, until you're making money in that, no one's going to chase you anyway, really, because there's no money in the pot to win.
That's true.
And in the moment you make it big, particularly if you make it as big as Oasis, at that point it's like, well, we've got the money to fight them off if we need to, or give away the money if we need to. I'll just wait for them to come to me. Yeah. And in most cases, unless there's some mega hit which is quite clearly got something borrowed, it won't be worth the lawyer's time. So I do think probably this isn't good legal advice, but it's like probably just write the music you want to write, regardless of if it sounds too similar, and then deal with that later.
Yeah, I mean, I often say to people who ask me, "Oh, you do a lot of covers. What's the rules around covers?" And I was like, "Well, a cover is like it's got to be faithful. It's got to you can't change the lyrics and melody, but then you'll do something that does change the lyrics and melody. You'll send it to a publisher and they go." Well, normally if you haven't changed the lyrics, but you could change the underlying backing, for example, or you could rearrange the verse and chorus or drop a verse and chorus. You'll send it to the publisher and they'll just go, oh yeah, that's a cover. Even though it's not technically a cover because you've adapted it. And so people say, well, can I release this? I was like, yeah, just release it, write it down as a cover, and, it'll either blow up and the writer will be happy with it or they won't. But if you try and wait for permission to do all of this, you can be waiting for...
Definitely.
Like a year and a half, and then the moment's passed, and there's no real, like you said, it's not legal advice. There's no right way or wrong way to do it. Yeah. But it's probably better to just get on and do your thing.
Yeah, exactly. And like I think people imagine copyright law as being in such detail that someone sat down and gone through every use case and every case study, when really, like the governments who brought in copyright law whenever they did, they were just doing a sort of slap it on. You could kind of summarize it in a couple of sentences, and then the courts work out the rest.
Yeah.
So often there is so many grey areas. There isn't a right or wrong. It's not like how many seconds can I use, how many notes can I use. It's like, well, no one's ever actually sat down and said that. There's no authority for it. It's just sort of what will happen in court.
No, I mean, that's the word in the 1988 Copyright Act, certainly for the UK anyway. The word is substantial. So if you use the substantial part, but then what is substantial? Like you said, so there's been a bunch of cases where X artist has sued Y artist, and a judge has decided that that's substantial.
Yeah.
So then anyone who understands that or who spends their time in copyright law will go, okay, so I know that if it's roughly in that area, then that's considered substantial.
And from there you can kind of work it out. But it's like the problems I deal with on YouTube using copyrighted music in an educational setting. There's not like there's definitely a concept of fair use, but beyond that, it's like, well, you figure it out. You know, who knows how long of a clip you can use.
I guess I've seen you've used certain bands. You are obviously more militant than others because there's some bands you've definitely had. Which are the ones you have to use cover versions of? It's
changed in the time I've been on YouTube as well.
Right.
Since 2018, it has changed a lot. It is more lenient now. You can get away with more now, despite the fact that there is a bit more chat about it now. Like Rick Beato, who's a big creator in the space, big music YouTuber, he talks a lot about the copyright issues of music. But it has actually got easier. It is still harder than it should be.
Okay, well, that discussion about YouTube leads us back to where I want to go to next. So you've said before that your success on YouTube was about going all in on the platform. Do you think is that the best advice you can give to artists or anyone wanting to be a success on a specific platform?
I do think that's the case, yeah. I think a big part of why I was successful on YouTube is because I thoroughly understood the culture of the platform. I was watching it all the time, and not just watching generic stuff, but watching stuff in the subgenre that I wanted to contribute to. So you learn not just the culture and like the etiquette of the space, but the actual functionality of the platform, what does work, what doesn't work. I think if you want to get big on YouTube, you have to treat it like a full-time job.
Yeah.
Putting in those sort of hours, despite the fact that you may or may not get paid at any point. Hopefully,
for watching all those videos.
Yeah, well, yeah, like if you start creating videos, you've got to put them out as if you're getting paid to make them.
Yeah.
And assuming that you're going to be working at your actual full-time job, the idea of trying to get big on YouTube and on other platforms at the same time, personally, I think is impossible. They each have their own culture. You need to be putting in so much attention to the content you make, because it has to be quality over quantity. You can't just think, if I just shovel enough on there, like it will catch light.
Yeah, what were the key things what were the key parameters that you learned in those early days, and you thought my videos have to have, these 3, 4, or 5 things?
I think you like long intros, get them out. Like anything that doesn't have to be in there, get it out. You want to be able to hook people in somehow. So even if your video is about kind of something else, maybe sort of time signatures, you might want to hook them in by putting in a famous example in the thumbnail or something, where rather than saying, I'm going to talk today about 5/4 time, you might say, I'm going to talk today about Radiohead or something that people are more aware of already, and that can be like the gateway in. I think as well, it's so important to, as I was saying, focus on quality. It's not about uploading. It's about everyone has to be good.
Yeah.
Because what you're effectively doing is with each upload, you're winning a little bit more trust with the algorithm, because the algorithm can only recommend things based on data. And when in the early days, when you've only got a few viewers, you don't have much data. So those early videos, if you start sort of shoveling on loads of unrelated stuff, people click on it and they'll think, oh, this isn't what I signed up for.
Yeah.
And then they'll never watch again, and you've lost them. And now the algorithm
knows
thinking, oh, these people don't want to watch. So
yeah,
even if it takes you a month, 2 months to create that quality, do it, and it will pay off, because you'll build anticipation, and people will know when you click on that thumbnail that you're not going to waste their time, that you're going to deliver.
And what else was important? Like, so I'm guessing video length, and even the thumbnails, and how the descriptors and what you put in the
thumbnail and title is a bottleneck, right? So like the video can be the best video in the world, but if it has a rubbish thumbnail and title, no one will ever find out.
Right. Okay.
So yeah, you get to know what sort of things bring people in. Like early doors, I realized, like, I love the Beatles, so I was talking about the Beatles a lot.
Yeah.
And I realized a lot of other people do as well. So if I put the Beatles in the thumbnail, that will get people through the door. People always sort of shy away from the idea of clickbait, but thumbnails and titles by definition are clickbait. You are providing a bait for people to click. So you have to clickbait a bit, but you have to deliver on the promises that you make. So you can sensationalize it a bit, but you don't want to make it, like, the worst thing is when people do, like, they think, I'm going to make a series, so this one will be episode 1, so the title will begin with episode 1, and then it will be the name of our show, so the name of our show, and then at the end, what the topic is on. And that looks awful. It's like, episode 1 of what? I've never seen it. Why would I care what episode it is? You don't want to focus on recurring videos. Every video should be focused on converting new viewers.
Yeah.
So imagine they don't know who you are. They don't know that you've actually been doing this for years. You need to capture them and
with that title
and that thumbnail.
Interesting. We could probably learn from that. So, you really mastered YouTube, but if you were to start again from scratch, would you still pick YouTube? Is it your favorite platform, or would you, as other platforms kind of intrigued you?
I think for me, I don't really. I try TikTok. I don't use TikTok,
right.
And therefore I think it would be silly for me to try and use it, launch myself on it, because I don't understand it.
Yeah.
Instagram, I use a bit. I only maintain it really as a networking tool. YouTube, I understand, but on top of all of that, the one thing that makes YouTube stand out, and the reason people who get big on things like Instagram and TikTok jump ship to YouTube eventually, is YouTube is the only platform that allows you to make a living from it, because it's the only platform that allows you to monetize your views in a meaningful way.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's fantastic. There's sort of the money you can earn as a creator on YouTube is way greater than all the others. It's totally true.
And TikTok will never catch up, because there's only so many ads you can put on short form, because if the ads are longer than the video itself, then no one's going to watch that. So
no, I mean, people have to use their sort of influence on those platforms for something else, like normally selling other stuff or sort of co-promos and stuff.
Definitely.
And it's not as, I guess, it's not as pure, for want of a better word, as doing it on YouTube.
And I do sponsorships as well and that sort of thing. You want to have a few income streams, obviously, but it's nice on YouTube that you don't have to fully rely on corporate stuff, on collaborations. You can make it as pure as you want it to be, and then the ad revenue, or maybe even YouTube Premium viewers who have paid to not see ads, can fully finance it.
But even the stuff you do as ads is really useful. The book that you recommend is the book you should read before starting music theory. I bought that. I totally agree with you. The ear training sort of app because as a DJ, I started off as a DJ, so mixing vinyl. So nothing is in key, 100%.
Yeah.
Everything is slightly flat, slightly sharp, sped up, slowed down. Your ears just get used to thinking, it's all fine. And the reality is, as a music producer, it's not all fine. So you need to be like, and so that's been really useful for me as well. And things like, hook theory, all these other things that you sort of use to.
I try and be selective. Occasionally I will get criticism for taking a certain sponsor, and then what I wish that everyone knew is that all of the sponsors I don't take. I don't tell you about the ones I don't take, or the crappy apps and
Who on earth is criticizing you for taking sponsors?
Well, it's for example, something that's happened recently is anything that has AI in its name.
Right. Okay.
You always have people. You have these people who have a knee-jerk reaction to AI.
Right. Okay.
Even though I've already used, for example, there's a sponsor I've had for a long time who is like a stem separation app.
Yeah.
So you plug a song in, it separates it all out. It's super cool. That's using AI algorithms, but it doesn't put it in its brand name. So that one doesn't get knee-jerk reaction.
Right.
But one I did the other day, which was this violin plugin that you play with a keyboard. Traditionally, those are powered by like samples.
Yeah.
This one was powered by AI. Practically speaking, it's exactly the same as the sample ones. It's just kind of better. But because it has AI in its name, everyone was like, "Don't take sponsors from AI. It's ruining everything." And it's like,
I mean, it's an interesting question. Do you think it is ruining everything? How do you feel about AI?
First of all, it's here to stay. So
Yeah,
anyone who's like trying to like push against the tide of it, we can try and get the right laws and stuff in to control it, but it's not going anywhere. But it's any technology as powerful as that is going to change so many aspects of life, and so often you notice the bad before the good.
Yeah.
You notice all the things it's taking away rather than the things it's giving. And I think there's so many micro use cases, in not just in music production, but in everything, that it's going to really help with. There's also a lot of problems, particularly with copyright infringement.
Yeah.
And that we need to figure out. We need to, in the same way that when the medium of recorded music was invented just over 100 years ago, and musicians were against it because if you record me, why would anyone pay to see my concert?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I see your concern, but I don't think you're thinking big enough yet. And the bottom line is, we're not going to uninvent the vinyl record, so we're going to have to learn to deal with it. We're not going to uninvent AI.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I find interesting is, because you can go onto a website and you can get Drake to sing your song, you can have Whitney Houston sing your song, and with doing a cover version and having someone mimic the famous song, that's always been fine, because you're clearly not saying it's the famous person. And it's hard for people to get that close. Although we have had a couple of cases where the original artist has thought that our mimic was actually them. But that's a different kettle of fish. However, if you've got AI who's mimicking it, then you could sort of, within the ones and zeros, you could get actually almost identical to the...
It's true. Although what I find interesting is whether it's AI generating music or AI trying to sound like Whitney Houston or whatever, it's kind of doing the same thing a human being would do, which is deeply study and understand every micro detail and then use that to inform a new performance.
That's interesting.
Like last week I worked with a John Lennon impersonator to create a version of Creep by Radiohead as if it were performed by John Lennon.
Fantastic.
And I think it sounded really, really close to Lennon's voice.
Yeah.
If I use AI, people would be outraged. I can't really use John Lennon's voice with AI against his will when an impersonator can do it and it's seen as well-spirited. And so I think a lot of it's perception. But identity, identity theft is obviously something that for centuries it's been against the law. Now there's a whole new way of doing that. And whether you're thinking of the actual person's personal identity or their brand, in terms of like trademark law, it's going to be a whole new thing that the law needs to catch up with. Just like in the year 2000 with Napster, where like the law, the governments woke up and realized, oh, there's this new technology and it's moving way faster than we move. We're going to have the same problems again. Give it a couple of decades and we'll learn how to deal with it.
Interesting. Yeah, I saw your video about predictions for the future where you talk about library music, and I think that's one thing where AI can definitely, not for all the library music composers out there, it's going to be a little bit like when all the mines shut down. But there are definitely some positives for it, and and I think that people do need to sort of calm down a little bit. When you talk about that's what a human would do, they would sort of really hone in on it and copy every detail, and that's all a machine's done. It doesn't really I've changed my opinion about it now.
But if you tell AI to write me a song that sounds like the Beatles, and tell a human, they're doing the same thing. So a lot of it's perception, but it comes down to what the impact it has. If that AI then spits out a song that actually sounds exactly like All You Need Is Love, then of course that's infringing copyright, just like if a human did that. So it's just working out this new game that we've got to play now.
Exactly. Talking about working out games, you are, as well as sort of, you've got a very successful YouTube career, but you're also a musician. You also write your own songs, release your own songs. Do you feel that do they complement one another, or is there some conflict there? Tell us a bit about how they affect each other.
I think the most obvious way they complement each other is that I have built this audience up who are interested in what I do, so I naturally have someone to sort of show my music to, which is such a great feeling. So quite often when people are like posting on YouTube and stuff and trying to build a following for their own music, my advice would be get people's attention first and then sell them your music. So do something maybe like a cover version or something, because it is a great way of sort of leveraging audience. But Personally as well, something that I think I used to do a lot, and I've seen other songwriters do, is they'd pour over this small selection of songs for maybe a year and put everything into it and release it and hope for the best, and then it doesn't do as much as they wanted to, and they feel disheartened. Whereas on YouTube, what I've been doing for the last like 7-8 years is I spend a week making a video. I pour everything into it. I make it as good as I can. I release it. It may do great. It may not do great.
Yeah.
I move on to the next one.
Yeah.
And then do that again and do that again. And each one I get better. Each one I get more popular. If you do that with music, obviously music is a different product than video, but have that similar ethos where you're less precious about each individual piece and you're willing to just move on and learn and develop. Hopefully then, by that process of just rinse and repeat, you will get to those hits you want. You'll get as good as you can get.
I think that's totally true. I often say to people, "Oh, it's not ready to be released yet," and I was like, "It doesn't matter. Just put it out there because you will learn X from making it.
Yeah.
Guaranteed, you will learn at least 2X from releasing it and everyone having an opinion about it. You'll certainly learn about how you deal with other people's opinions.
Yeah.
Also, playing your music to other people, having it on Spotify or any other streaming service where you can sit and play it in someone's house and you see people's reactions. You think, oh, you listen to your own music with a whole new light.
Definitely.
And that's a whole process that people need to go through.
Creativity is it's like a pipe. If you don't release something, you're blocking the pipe. So you need to keep the flow going. Obviously, there's still, you have to balance that with quality as well. It has to be quality, but if you pour over every detail forever, you won't ever release anything and ever grow as a
that's absolutely true. And so, what's your plan with your music then? What you said when we spoke just before this, you said you had a plan. You were on the verge of.
Yeah, well, I released an EP of songs about this time last year, and ever since that, I've been working towards an album.
Right. Okay.
And like we were just saying, working towards that EP. I tried to make it as good as I can. And the moment it came out and I reflected on it and stuff, I thought, oh, I've learned so much from that.
Yeah.
And now I can take that to this album. So that's the next big project is end of this year, beginning of next year, release the album. And hopefully at some point, maybe do some live shows off the back of that too. Because ever since I started YouTube, I've never actually done a live thing. So it'd be really cool to advertise that and see who turns up.
And is it the way you talked about the plan? Is it are you releasing it all as one? Or are you going to release it like single by single by single?
The album will come out, and then I'm planning on making various videos, either music videos or sort of live studio performances of the songs to promote each one. That's kind of a lesson I learned from the previous one. Is like I need to have more content. Releasing an album, at most you feel people's attention for a day or two, but I'm also going to do some live streams sort of breaking down the production and theory of each track.
Right, okay.
Just try and get content out of it, but in the most sort of authentic way I can.
That fits with what you do
and
your
that
platform.
Makes sense, yeah.
It's another question that I had. So is there anything that you have learned or from your YouTube experience from growing your YouTube, is there anything that could be applied to a musician's career, or is it even applying it to you? Are you taking anything from what it took to grow that YouTube channel to forward? Is that part of your plan to grow yourself as a singer-songwriter?
I think that they're definitely different mediums because whereas a video might get watched twice at maximum, a song you ideally want to be played various times.
Yeah.
The thing I definitely think is consistent between both, as sort of if you're trying to get people to listen to stuff, is when you first hook people in, you might need to, like we were saying earlier, do something that appeals to something they already know. So like a cover of a song that is similar to yours, get people through the door somehow, and then you can give them the stuff which they're maybe less familiar with. So, now when I upload videos on YouTube, I'm guaranteed to have a certain amount of viewers who will watch regardless, and that's great. And that means that if I do something on a topic which is like quite interesting to me, but maybe less people know about it, it will actually get viewed. Whereas at the beginning, if I'd done those topics, it would have fallen. No one would have heard it, seen it, or heard about it, or whatever.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, it's the like we talked about earlier. Build your audience, and we've talked about it in other podcasts. Build your audience, and then show them your weirdness. Like
yeah.
Find your lane, find your people, and then they'll you can expand and
for sure.
Well, that's us nearly at the end now, and I like to wrap up with asking everyone the same couple of questions. But normally, it's sort of people that are much more rooted in dance music, so we talk about a DJ scenario where they play their last song. But obviously, I'm fascinated. You've analysed hundreds of songs. What's the one song you wish you could have written, and why?
There are so many songs I wish I could have written, and it makes you think more about like the composition itself rather than like the production. So my favourite song of all time is Strawberry Fields Forever by the Beatles.
Right.
But a big part of what makes that song great is the sound and the production and everything. So if we're talking about like the actual, the core song, I think a song ultimately sort of bottles a feeling, right? A song that I really like, I used to play all the time when I did sort of solo piano gigs is Every Time We Say Goodbye, Cole Porter. Which purely bottles the feeling, and that's why it is a timeless song, because it's a timeless feeling. So,
it's a fantastic choice.
It's a song that anyone can understand, right? And it does what it's meant to do.
No, it's a brilliant choice. Even just saying the title, I can already feel that feeling of of regret, of missing, of the thing that the song's supposed to do.
The bittersweetness, and it's iconic. It has that iconic move. How strange to change from major to minor with the major chord going to the minor chord. It's such an obvious idea, but someone had to do it at some point, and that someone was Cole Porter, getting on for about 100 years ago now. But it's those staples which it's just so perfect,
Yeah, no, it's a cracking song.
Yeah.
And the other thing I like to ask everyone is, so we're going to take you back. And because you did music at uni, want to go back to before you started your music degree, and you get to meet David Bennett just as he's heading off to uni for the first day. What's the one piece of advice you'd give him?
I think the thing I didn't do enough is more of what I actually wanted to do. So I turned up at uni wanting to be a songwriter, and quickly, because opportunities arose, got more into being a working piano player.
Yeah.
And by the time I left uni, I was working full-time as a piano player, doing functions, doing recordings, writing. And I had a good career doing that. But I actually always kind of wanted to be more of a creative and songwriter rather than playing other people's tunes. But I was too focused on, like, I want to come out of uni and be working. Which obviously, has its benefits too.
Yeah.
But, I never had to go and work at Tesco's or anything, which is nice.
Yeah.
But if the only way you get better at something is putting the hours in. If I had started putting the hours in more with songwriting and production, then, I feel like I'm playing catch up now. Like I could have made more progress then, but it's come full circle when now I'm come back to it, and
I think that I think that is very fair. I mean, I did a lot myself where I got good at being an A&R or being a record label, and ended up being someone else's record label when really I wanted to be the artist, make my own music, be the producer, be the DJ who was doing it. And you just get sidetracked because you're good at something.
Yeah.
So,
and it's good to change what you're good at. Because that is how you're going to get the furthest and probably make the most money. And everyone needs to make money, right? But it's very easy to then get completely swept into it and kind of forget why you arrived here in the first place.
And it's much better to be the happiest at doing the thing that you really want to do rather than being the richest for doing the thing you're really good at. That's what I think anyway.
For sure, I agree. Yeah.